I still love what I do every day. And I think that if you do, like, it will naturally show, because you're going to want to get out there. And in the end of the day, we're all here to help our patients. We want them to get better. And that's really what it's all about.
Today, we'd like to welcome Kara Lombardo to the series. Kara has been a PA for almost 20 years. She's got a deep, deep history in a variety of different surgical specialties, and she currently serves as the Chief Surgical PA at Danbury Hospital in Connecticut, which is part of the New Vance Health System. So we want to welcome Kara, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you. So let's start with your PA journey. You've been a PA for almost 20 years, but take us back to how you came upon that decision and what that journey was like for you.
So growing up in a small town in central New York, I played sports. I was a 3-sport athlete. I had 35 kids in my graduating class. And I always knew that I wanted to do something in either sports or the health field. My mom was an EMT in the local community fire department, which she was the first female that served in that role. So I could see my mom as a healthcare professional doing that. And I kind of said, well, if I go into medicine, it combines two of my passions, hopefully, sports and my love of health. So my journey started going to Ithaca College, where I majored in exercise science. When I was there, I knew even then that I wanted to do more. At the time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to medical school or PA school, but by the time I had graduated, I knew that becoming a PA was almost certain what I wanted to do. My first job out of school, I worked in a corporate fitness gym in Lower Manhattan, and then eventually I transitioned to doing cardiac rehab at a small community hospital in Westchester County, New York. And I met some great PAs there, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. So what was it? Do you remember what the turning point was? Because it sounds like you had a couple of different things that you had been thinking about, but what really drove you to become a PA?
As a female, I knew that eventually I would have a family, and I wanted to have a career where I could do both, where I could be a professional, take care of people. That was something I knew even in high school that it was really something that I wanted to do. But I was also mindful of the fact that I wanted to be able to have flexibility, to have time with my family and not be bogged down, in a career where it was all work and nothing else. Mm-hmm. And that was what drove me to a PA, because as physician assistants, we are trained to do everything. So when you go to PA school, you learn all the different facets of medicine. And when we recertify, now it's every 10 years, we still have to have that knowledge base in all different areas of medicine. So you have the ability to change, focus of medicine during your career. If you pick one thing and you don't like it, you can go on to something else that works better for you. And I liked that idea of that.
Did you hit any roadblocks along the way in terms of I definitely knew I wanted this, but then I switched gears?
Once I knew that I wanted to become a PA, then it was just a matter of the process to do that, because now I was already working in cardiac rehab. I had a good job. I had to go back to school and take some classes that I hadn't. So there was a period of time where I was trying to work and figure out, now, where am I going to go to school? Am I going to stay close to home? Do I want to travel? Those were all things I had to work out to figure out where I wanted to go to school. And then, of course, trying to get into school. Mm-hmm. And that in and of itself is its own journey.
What were you thinking during that time?
I knew I didn't want to be far from home. But I wanted to be a PA so much that I said, well, I'll at least start by, looking at schools and I live in New York, so in the tri-state area. And if there's not a match for me, or if it doesn't work out, because it's so competitive. So I was worried. That's why I went back and took classes again, because I wanted my grades to be better. I was worried about my experience, because 20 years ago, most of the PA programs, you had to have direct healthcare experience, which is something now PAs don't have to worry about. People that want to go to PA school don't always have to worry about that. So there was a lot of, I don't know if I can do this, and just trying to find the right programs for me.
How'd that make you feel?
It was at times, because I was getting, as I'm applying to programs, certain programs never even reached out back to me for an interview. And so it's, then you start second guessing, is this really for me? Do I really want to do this? But I just kept persevering and continuing to work. And eventually I found, the right fit for me. I was accepted to Albany Medical College, and that's where I wound up going to PA school. And it was the perfect fit for me. So
I know we're probably going to spend a lot of today talking about your current role and your exposure and really dealing with tons and tons of new graduate PAs. But, for our viewers, I think it's important to kind of just highlight your background, because I know you said you had this desire to bridge the sports with your PA degree. And so I know you worked for many, many years as a physician assistant in orthopedics. So how'd that all come about?
So in your training for PA school, typically, at least the program I went to, our program was 2.5 years. So the first year you spend in the classroom, you're learning all different areas of medicine, learning how to do physical exams. But then in your second year, when you're doing rotations, there are certain rotations that are chosen for you. And in my program, there were several elective rotations that we were able to choose where we wanted to do them, which not all programs have the opportunity for. And for me, it was great because I was able to do those rotations close to home because I wanted to be home. But I had that, once I was in school and we learned orthopedics, I really liked orthopedics. As an athlete, and I knew I would like it, but then in the back of your mind, you're like, am I going to go to school and really like it? But I loved it. I also loved pediatrics. So then so I wasn't sure, I was kind of like, what am I going to do once I graduate? But once I did my rotation where I worked in a group, I was in the operating room, I was seeing patients in the office, then I knew that was what I wanted to do.
How do you feel doing that? Finally, you started.
It was great. It was amazing to be able to come to work every day and take care of people. I still feel that way now, 20 years later. But to finally be there and working with great physicians who are teaching every day, but people, when you take care of people, they are just so grateful, especially in orthopedics. It's an area of medicine where you can really make people better, whether it's through surgery, through injections, through therapy. It's very rewarding. And it's, for me, it was always the grateful patients that would keep me going every day.
Awesome. I love your story. I've known you for so long, but I never knew all the ins and outs of it. So I'm glad you got to share it today. So let's chat about the new grad PA process. So really the hiring process, which I know everybody that's watching is anxious to kind of hear your thoughts on that, having interviewed, I'm sure, hundreds and hundreds of PAs and reviewed countless resumes. So take me through your process when you have an opportunity to hire a new graduate.
So I've hired several new graduates in the program where I currently work. And for me, whether they're a new grad or an experienced PA, the first things when a resume comes across my desk, or through my computer, actually, we're looking at, and for new grads, where they're going to school, but also, they will list their rotations and what they've done over their last 2 years of training. So for someone who's applying for a surgical position, that's what I'm looking at. What kind of courses, what rotations have they been going through that can show to me why they're interested in applying for the job with me and our group.
What can they put on their resume as someone interested in being a surgical PA that's going to stand out for you?
Obviously, everyone will put, their objective. That's on my own CV, that is, I have on there what my objective is. And for me, I list that I've been an experienced orthopedic PA for a number of years. But for a new grad, why are you interested in surgery? You're obviously applying for me for a surgical position. I want to know why, why you want to pursue surgery. And, how they write that can just be, whether it's, their experiences in their own personal life and in their schooling experiences, something that just stands out to me that, yes, I think this is somebody that as a surgical candidate would be somebody we'd want on our team.
Mm-hmm. So you're looking at rotations, which totally makes sense, and seeing that there's that consistency with what they've done and what they're applying for. What else are you looking for on a new grad resume that makes you dig a little deeper?
And again, with new grads, they don't have a lot to put on their resume other than PA school. So other experiences. I've seen resumes that have, that they've volunteered for different community organizations, that they've, participated on sports teams, that they've volunteered their time in hospitals, whatever things that kind of stand out to say that this is this, that helped them to choose that's where they want to be.
Okay. So now you've made that connection. But at the end of the day, something's got to really pop off that resume to make you say, all right, so now I have all these resumes in front of me, but these are the ones I'm going to bring in.
So, in my world, and again, especially in the post-COVID world where we had so many resumes coming in, a lot of it is I just read through something and I go with my gut. Like if I see that someone did four different rotations that involve surgery and they volunteered somewhere, it's the whole package. I can't say that there's that one thing that pops. It's kind of the, all their experiences, the things that they can put on there. And again, I know they're new, so they don't have, in terms of their work experience a lot, but it's just the other things they've done that can say to me that this is what drove them to become a PA.
Yep, that's something that's just beyond the basics.
Yes.
Sure. All right, so now you've selected a couple of resumes and you've set up those appointments and you have those new grads at your doorstep ready for their interview. Tell me about your interview process and your style.
So the team that I manage, we cover a large number of surgical services. So we don't just cover orthopedics. There's 7 surgical services that we cover. So typically when we start, I'll, obviously introduce myself and then I kind of start by telling them about our team. Because I find that one, it sparks questions for them to ask me. It also answers, I think, some of the kind of basic questions they would ask, so they can then ask other things that they really want to know. But I tend to spend time just talking about our team. What is a typical work day? What is the schedule? Just to give them a really good sense of what they're getting into in the job that we're looking for. And once I kind of go through that, because there are a lot of the team that I manage has a lot of moving parts. So once I'm done describing all of that, then I give them the opportunity to ask any questions. But, my always first question when I'm done talking is, what drove you to apply for this job? What is it about surgery that made you want to apply here?
And what's a great answer to that? What are you looking for?
I mean, I always think back to for myself, when I did my general surgery rotation in PA school, it was the first time I had ever set foot in an operating room. And I loved it. I loved it. And I always remember the preceptors there, and my rotation, at the end of the first week, they were like, you need to go into surgery because, and I'll never forget, and I say it now to new people I hire, you can just tell.
What did you feel like? What did it feel like?
And it's one of those things, like, it was just so exciting. And I was like, you're operating on somebody. It was so amazing to be in there, seeing anatomy, like doing different cases, general surgery. We were doing, taking out gallbladders and taking out appendixes and hernia repairs. But it was like this world I had never had always, like, I thought I would like it. Yeah. And then I got there and I loved it. And they said to me, they're like, you really need to consider going into surgery because we can just tell that you love it. Mm-hmm. And so that's, and that sometimes you can tell on an interview. And you hope, like, that's one thing that, if you're really passionate about whatever you want to do as a PA, you have to figure out a way to show that passion in an interview and then obviously be able to show it once you start working.
So I love that you start the interview by really getting a lot of the basic kind of housekeeping stuff out of the way, because I'm sure you do it kind of like quick and neat and it doesn't become a kind of a dry conversation. So now you're volleying it. You're at the point where you volley it back to the candidate. What types of things are you looking for them to ask that really says to you, like, wow, this could be a potential, I'm like excited about this person?
So, and that's why I always lead off about what our team does, because then I want to know from them, what experiences did you have in PA school? Like, what can you bring to our team? What types of rotations have you done that you think that, you'd make a good team member for us? We always talk about, like, I always ask about strengths and weaknesses in terms of, their training as a new grad. But a lot of it is just, what can you bring to us? Because as a new grad, they have so much to learn, but they also have their, at least looking at my team and all the new grads that I've brought on, they're just so excited. They want to learn, and you just want to show that passion when we're talking.
You brought up a good point about, strengths and then the dreaded weaknesses, right? So I think a lot of folks know what they're good at and they're afraid to talk about that weakness. So what's the best way to answer the what's your weakness question?
So I actually had this conversation with some of my colleagues this morning, because I'm like, what do we say? Because we all know we have weaknesses, but you don't want to minimize them, but you don't, you're afraid to say what they are, but we all know that we have them. For some people, it's that they're passive about certain things. For some people, they're not comfortable, with larger groups of people, whatever it may be. But, I think it's just being honest about what the weakness is. And again, whatever position you're going for, you hope that whatever weaknesses you do have, obviously can be worked through and that your strengths will outshine any weakness that you have.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here, so forgive me. So you have a candidate that you're interviewing, and can you come up with, I know it's going to be on the fly, but a way to answer that question in real time? You're giving us the good kind of framework for how to answer it, but what would be an example that you would say, yeah, good job?
So, and again, just thinking about different people that I've worked with over the years, I find in our world, you can't be passive. And that's why I brought that up as an example before, because we're dealing with patients and we're taking care of people, and this is their lives. Like, something you do may, could potentially cause a problem for whatever patient you're taking care of. So it's a hard one to swallow for people to say that, yeah, I realize that I can be a passive person, but I know that, in this job, I have to be able to stand up and take care of my patient, whatever that may be.
Right. And so what are you thinking when they're talking about their weaknesses? How does your kind of evaluation process go on?
Like I said, a lot of it is just their honesty. And, we can work through any kind of weakness, but as long as people are honest that they have them, if someone says, I don't really know what my weaknesses are, then they're fooling themselves. And that's
what
are
you thinking at that moment? You're like, yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, we all do. We don't like to admit it. Who the heck does? But it's real. And, as a manager now, managers have to deal with confrontation. And who likes to deal with confrontation? Nobody. I don't like to do it, but I have to. It's a necessary evil. So I wouldn't say it's a weakness, but I would say it's probably or I've become better at making sure that's not a weakness. But it's one of those things you have to overcome. You have to work through it. But you also have to look for positions and jobs based on your strengths and weaknesses, because you're going to set yourself up for failure if you can't work through that.
I'm just kind of running through some of my own weaknesses in my mind. I'm sure if my husband was up here, he'd be able to kind of rattle them off for you. But it's a scary place for them to be, right? They've just finished their schooling. They've gone through all their testing, and now they're, out there, and they're putting themselves out there, and now they have to kind of own up to what some of their weaknesses might be. It's scary.
Sure, absolutely. And as a new grad, you're scared of everything, and that's okay. I remember, as excited as I was starting out, I didn't know anything. And I think that is one of the most important things for new grads to remember, and it's something that I do see at times, is we also have to be humble. You can't be out there, setting this expectation that you are so great and you know everything, because in the world of medicine, that's not going to work out very well. So yes, you can be confident, but you also have to be very humble.
So thinking back, and hopefully our viewers will relate or be shaking their heads, what type of things kept you up at night? What type of things were you scared of when you first started practicing?
Everything. Right. No, what? I can tell you this week something that kept me up at night, and that's 20 years later. Specific patients, just situations where, and again, my first job, we did elective surgery, so we didn't always have, most people had a great outcome. But in the beginning, you always worried about, did I make the right diagnosis? Did I do the injection in the right spot? Did I prescribe the right medicine? Am I doing a good job? Am I not going fast enough for the doctors? Am I too slow? Am I doing okay? Am I not suturing fast enough in the OR? Because that is always something that everyone's staring at you in the beginning. So it's always am I really doing okay?
What's everyone really thinking when that new PA is maybe her hands are shaking a little bit and she's suturing? What's everyone thinking?
Well, it depends who's standing there.
I'm sure.
Honestly, the anesthesiologists are tapping their watches because they're like, come on. They're they want you to go faster. But listen, I had great teachers when I became a PA, and they took the time, and they didn't rush me, and that's why I was able to develop my skills. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of teacher I am now. So yes, there will always be people that will be looking around, that may be saying that you're, not doing it fast enough, but I just calm them, and I'm like, you're doing a great job, and you just have to give that positive reinforcement. because that's what's going to help them get better.
So we've talked so much about that interview process, but invariably everybody worries about the toughest question. Like, what's the toughest question I'm going to get asked on these interviews, and how do I answer it? So, Kara, what's your toughest interview question?
So knowing I was coming here, I had to stop and think, what is the toughest question? And I realized I don't ask really tough questions. So I have one of my most experienced PAs on my team. She's been a PA for 30 years, and she, as well as the rest of the members of my team, help with the interview process. So I asked her this morning, I was like, what's the toughest thing you ask PAs when they come and interview? So we sat there and had a good chuckle for a while, because we both realized, and we are both of the generation of, we're like the tough old PAs, that actually when we interview, we don't ask. And I don't know why we don't ask, but like I said, we will ask about, being part of a team and what your skills are like and why you want to come here. But there are always tough questions that people can ask. I asked some of the other my other colleagues, and I said, what are tough questions that have come through? And I think the biggest one, and this is across the board, is clinical situations. So, sometimes they will give you a scenario of, something that happens to a patient, and how would you deal with it? And especially for someone new, and even as someone that has very experienced, that can be a tough question to think about and answer, is what you would do in certain situations. So I think that's one. And that
So I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
What would be the framework on how someone should be responding if they're given one of those clinical scenarios?
Sure.
Like, what are you looking for?
Honestly, I'm looking for an honest answer. So, for example, if a patient is just had surgery, and they all of a sudden, you get a call from the nurse because their blood pressure's high and their heart rate is high, and they look very pale. What do you do? And I don't mean it as a question to get you frazzled, but I just want to know quick in that clinical situation, what are you going to do? What are your thought processes of what could possibly be going on? Because in our world, we're constantly thinking about, well, if there's a problem, it could be X, Y, or Z. And I just want to know that X, Y, and Z are the things that you should be thinking.
What does it look like when that candidate or that new grad, you could see they're getting it? What does that look? How does that translate to?
You
what
can
you're
tell,
hearing?
because if they say to me, like in that kind of scenario, you're worried about, have they had blood loss? So, or if they have a fever. So you're at, you want them to be able. I want them to be able to say to me, I think that they may be developing anemia, and it's causing their blood pressure to go down, and their heart rate is high because the blood's not pumping as well as it should be. You just want to know that knowledge base, that they know what what they should be doing.
Mm-hmm. And then what are you thinking as you're getting the different answers to that question?
Well,
how are you evaluating?
Of course it's, what is their thought process? Because hopefully they're telling me that, just as I explained what would be going on, are they thinking on the right path? Are they in the right mindset of that, yes, this is how to take care of the patient, or are they totally in the wrong direction and they're not really understanding the scenario? Because if they're, and it wouldn't be something totally complex, but if it's a basic scenario that they should have a general understanding, then it's probably not the right thing for them and our team. So that's what we're looking for, is just that they can understand on a general scale what we're looking for.
So, Kara, let's start talking about the red flags during an interview process.
So, probably the number one would be someone who's not interested in what the position is, but is interested in, let's say, the compensation package, like, don't start off asking about like how much money, what my salary is going to be. That shows that you're not truly interested in being here. That's probably the biggest one. And someone who doesn't ask questions, someone who's very quiet during an interview, I'll talk, I can ask some questions, but someone who's then not interacting and really asking us some good questions.
What does that look like when a candidate's not interested? What is it like? What does it look like?
In this world, unfortunately, with COVID, all the people that I hired in the last year and a half were all interviewed on Zoom. And so it's interesting because when you're one-on-one, sitting here, body language is huge. So you can just tell, like, people start sitting, they're not making eye contact. You can just tell people that are interested. They're perky. They're looking at you. They can't wait to ask the next question or give you an answer. You can just tell by their general demeanor, whether or not they're really in it for the right reasons.
And when someone's not giving you that vibe that they're interested, what's going through your mind?
Listen, I give everyone a fair opportunity, but when I get that vibe that I don't think that this position is for them, not that I cut it short, but again, because I kind of get out of the way all the things that I need to ask, or I talk about in the beginning in terms of the position and what we're looking for. Once we start having some dialogue, and if I don't see someone's asking a lot of questions or I don't get that vibe, then I'll just kind of be like, okay, and just kind of cut the interview there and not continue to ask other questions or try to get things from them.
Going back to the salary. So you have someone come in, you've maybe got high hopes for them, great resume. They sit down and right away they start talking about compensation. How do you handle it?
This one I can tell you from my own experience. So when I was when I was in private practice, I was in private practice for 13 years, and like anyone else, you start wondering, is the grass greener on the other side? So you start, so there were times that I would see a job posting somewhere, and I'm like, let me go see what it's about. So one time I went and I interviewed with a small orthopedic group. I went and I met with them, answered questions, and I look back on it now and I'm like, I can't believe I can't believe I said this. And their first question was, well, why are you looking to leave where you are? You've been there for so long. And I said, oh, I'm like, well, I'm really interested in a higher salary. And I'm like, I can't believe.
Oh my God. I was
did.
Cringing while you
right. And honestly it was, but I'm like, God, I can't believe I said that.
What were they?
But
what do you think they were thinking?
They were probably like, oh, this girl's out. 100%.
Next.
100%. But it is, and I hadn't been out that long. So it's just like one of those moves as a young person that I'm like, I can't believe I said that. Like now I look back. At the time it was really, I was being honest, but
right.
You have to kind of hold back on that honesty. So I would do the same thing if someone's, and that, and I can't say that I've had that experience with anyone that I've interviewed. But obviously, it's one of those things that you look at and you're like, no. Probably the other thing in terms of red flags are, again, we were talking about being confident but not being cocky.
You just thought of at least one person
100%,
there. Tell me the
100%.
story.
So, had a PA, and at the time I wasn't a manager, but where I was working, we had just hired a new grad PA. This was his first job out of school, and I can't remember. He had worked previously before going back to PA school. So he had work experience, but not anything in medicine. But he just came off very full of himself. And I remember saying to him, I was like, this as being your first job, I'm like, you really have to kind of kind of hold that back because the surgeons that we worked with were very prestigious, and there were a lot of great people that we worked with. And I'm like, and I just kept saying, like, it's not going to go over well. And we were in the operating room one day when there were no cases going on, and we were reviewing like setup, like how to position patients and the different equipment in the room, because again, as somebody that was brand new, we spent the time doing those things. And we were going over, some instrumentation that normally we as PAs would not be involved with the setup of during a case. But I said to him, I said, this is where the positioner goes, and these different instruments that we use go on, get set up here. And I'll never forget, he looked at me, he's like, well, that's not my job. And I said, and I just remember at that moment I was like, and I just looked at him and I said, well, if you really want to be a great PA someday, I'm like, you should be able to know every job in this operating room. Because you're a team. So you should be able to do anything that anyone else, short of the anesthesiologist, but anything that anybody else is doing to help. And at that moment, it was over for me, because I knew he was just not going to work out, and he didn't.
So a red flag in terms of coming in and being too cocky and not being open to really learning and having some humility in the process.
Sure, and not being a team player. There's not one person that we work with that's better than someone else, and that's how I took it, that he felt that he was above the other people in the operating room. And in medicine, it doesn't matter whether it's the person who's scrubbing the floors, whether it's the patient care tech who's, bathing a patient, the nurse, the PA, the doctor. It doesn't matter. Like, we are all in it to take care of our patients. And if you don't have that mindset, then 100% you're in the wrong business.
So we've talked a lot about red flags, things not to do, and some of them, obviously talking about once they actually come on board. Thinking about the interview process, what are some of the things candidates can do that really will be a green flag to, like, yeah, we want more of this, and this person might really do a great job here?
And when we interview people, like I said, in this world right now, we do the initial interview on Zoom. So if we like a candidate, and I do the initial interview. So if I like a candidate and I just feel like they're a good fit, and I know the personalities of the rest of my team, so I can tell, like, if someone's is a good fit, just, if they're bubbly, if they're a go-getter, you can tell that they really are interested in being part of a team and really want this job. Then I have them actually come in and they interview with the rest of the team, because that's really important. I could hire somebody and everyone else could hate them. And so for me as a manager, it's really important that everyone else is on board with somebody that I'm going to hire. So it's the person that asks a lot of, that's asking questions, what kind of cases are you doing, that really shows interest in what we are doing. And it's the different questions and the thought that they show that they really want this job.
Do you get a lot of questions about, because I've heard a lot of people are kind of afraid to ask this, which doesn't totally make sense to me, but what kind of mentoring am I going to have here? Students seem afraid to ask that, because it's kind of like revealing, like, well, I don't know everything. You don't. But so
it's interesting, and I agree that a lot of new candidates don't ask that. I actually just interviewed a PA about 6 weeks ago who has over 30 years of experience. And that was one of her first questions to me is, what kind of training am I going to get? Like, what is the process when you orient somebody? And most new grads don't ask that. And, they should. And I think when they come in and I don't sit in when they meet with my team, so I don't know if it's something where in talking with me they don't feel comfortable. And that's also why I have them come and meet with everyone else, because I feel like they will ask questions to my staff that they maybe don't feel comfortable asking me. But it is something that they don't often ask. I don't know why, but they don't.
So asking some good investigative questions. What other types of green flags can you think of that?
And again, for me, I find it's all attitude. And again, thinking back to when I was doing my surgery rotation, and my preceptors were like, you really need to go into surgery. I can't explain it, but people can just tell when you're really passionate about a job. And for us, it's a profession. It's not just a job, but you can just tell people that are in it because they want to take care of people. And I can't explain other than you can just, it's the glimmer in their eye. It's the, their body language when they're talking, the questions that they're asking. You can just tell they're passionate about it.
Right. After an interview, is there anything that a new grad could do to give them a leg up over the other folks that they've interviewed against, in essence?
With in my world where we're kind of sporadically doing that, always reaching out afterwards. And I find some candidates do that and some don't. And I was always taught from the get-go, and I don't remember who taught me that, but somebody along the way was always like, make sure you reach out like the next day. And not every candidate does that. But I find that shows even more so your interest is, because I always, at the end of an interview, if you have any questions, I give them my cell phone. I give them my email address. If you have any other questions, please reach out to me. So the ones who then reach out the next day,
I was going to say, what are you thinking when they do?
Oh, then I'm like, this is definitely somebody that we want to have, because they're showing me that, that after talking with me, talking with the team, that this is somewhere they want to be. And that to me it's a little thing, but it's a little big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Question. Should a new graduate PA be negotiating comp at the offer stage?
So again, I've dealt with this over the last couple of years because I've hired a lot of new grads. I think as new grads, you have to do your research. You have to know where in the area you're living, what the fair market value is. You have to know for the type of position you're going for, if you're doing primary care versus surgery versus, whatever it may be. You really have to kind of do your homework. Is there a little wiggle room? I mean, I know we have kind of a set line of what we offer compensation wise. But yeah, if somebody comes back and it's kind of way off of what we do, then that to me says that you haven't done your homework, or I'm not sure what you're thinking. But
how do you do that homework though? What does that actually look like? What should someone be doing?
So I think back to my first job. I got my first job because I did my orthopedic rotation at a local orthopedic group that was very prestigious. And at the end of my rotation, they're like, hey, we would love to have you when you graduate. So go finish school. And if you really want to come and work here, we'll take you. And when I graduated, I really wanted to go work there. So I remember calling my preceptor, the PA that I had worked with, and I said, because they had said to me, oh, just write, send us a letter and let us know what you want. So I'm like, I'm like 27 years old. I'm like, I don't know what I want. But I didn't want to look like an idiot and, and put an offer letter in with an amount that they would laugh at and tell me to find the next job. So I reached out to my preceptor and she's like, go on AAPA. There are different resources out there that will give you, based on regions, based on states of, what PAs as new grads, and then as their experience is increasing, increases over time, what the average salary is. And that gives you at least a good base. And there are plenty of resources online to do that. I just remember for myself going on AAPA, and they every year send me an email at the end of the year asking about my own salary so that I can contribute to those numbers.
The folks we've spoken to already, I think everyone to a man's been kind of giving the same advice on salary. Are there components, even as a new grad, that there is some wiggle room on that you can negotiate and open up that conversation on?
I think it depends on what area of medicine you're looking to go into. And I think it depends on what other experiences you may have. And, 20 years ago, when I went to PA school, all programs were programs where you had to have healthcare experience prior to going to school. So people had experience in other realms. And so I think if you have other healthcare experience, that can definitely give you wiggle room. I can tell you we had a nurse practitioner that we hired that we were able to do that with and we based it off of the number of years of experience she had as a nurse before she went on to get her APRN degree. So I think there are times where there is, but I think it depends on what other type of experience.
Right. So now
you have.
you've been in two different scenarios, right? You've been on the community, the practice side, and now you've worked for a couple of hospital systems. So things like continuing medical education, paid time off, maybe a little bit of flexibility in hours, are those types of things that perhaps a new grad can negotiate on, or like, where's the line, I guess, is what I'm asking.
It depends what area of medicine you're looking to go into. So when I worked in private practice, you just worked. And granted, it depends, again, what field of medicine you choose to go into. And I knew what I was getting into. Orthopedic surgery, we don't stop for lunch. You start early in the morning. You see patients till late at night. When you're in the OR, you could be in the OR for 10 hours or 12 hours. So I at least had the leisure that I knew exactly what my job was going to be. But it does depend on whether you're going to be hospital-based or in the outpatient world, because the schedules are very different. And as a new grad with interviewing anywhere, you really have to answer those questions, because you don't want to be surprised at what you think the job's going to be and then what it actually is.
So we're getting to where the rubber meets the road, Kara. Let's talk about that onboarding and honeymoon phase for the new graduates as they start their career journeys. Tell us some stories of, let's start with what not to do first.
I think starting out, have that expectation of, you want to be available, whatever the schedule may be. If you're someone that takes a job where, you're going to be working 3 12-hour shifts, but in the beginning, they're asking you to come in and work 5 days a week to train, you need to be available for that. So I think you have to have the mindset of, whatever's going to work for your new team, your new boss to train you, you have to be open to that. Because if you're not showing that flexibility from the beginning, that's going to be problematic during your training and then down the road.
Absolutely. So that's a great thing that you should be doing, showing flexibility. Let's talk about what they should not be doing. What shouldn't they be doing when they walk into that job?
So
story time.
Yeah. And again, it's, in the very beginning and this is true of and I think of all the jobs all 3 jobs I've had in my life as a PA, but with every new position, there's always that time where, there's so much that you're trying to comprehend in the beginning, and it's very overwhelming. And that doesn't change, whether it's your first job or your last job 30 years later. I think that people get caught up when they aren't open to just taking it in and learning. Sometimes people are resistant to what we're trying to teach them. Sometimes people will think there's a better way.
What are you thinking at that point when?
Well, it's, for me, I'm thinking, you have to be open to where we're going. We have a process. It has worked for us. And if people aren't flexible to that, then that starts to make me nervous that things aren't going to work out. I had a very experienced APP who joined our team, very experienced in their total healthcare experience, but fairly new. APP had only been in practice 3 years, and this was their first job in a surgical setting. But they had that mindset that they knew a lot already, and it showed because they were very resistant to other people trying to, just basic things of, our workflow, like what doctors like us to round on their patients, and there were just and it just every day was a struggle because this person you always felt tension and resistance because they just were not open to learning the process. And in the end, that person realized that this job wasn't for them, and they wound up leaving, 3 months after they had started, which is a lot of work for us to put in. I mean, I'm glad that they figured that out before they had been there a long time, but you just have to, you can't be resistant to what works.
What's the rest of the team, thinking at that point when someone's
it's exhausting.
acting that way?
It's exhausting. And it puts a wedge between the rest of the team and that person, because, they all work well together. And we have a workflow that has been proven to work. And so when you have someone like that, it brings negativity to everyone else. And then unfortunately, then everyone kind of starts backing themselves away from that person. So yes, they will answer questions, but they're not as open and as giving to helping with training because that person's got the perception of, well, I know what to do, or I don't need you to show me anything.
Why do you think they're acting that way?
In the particular example I just gave, I think it was just someone who had been a practitioner for a long time and didn't enjoy learning from people that were younger. As I consider myself an old PA now, although I'm not that old, but I love the enthusiasm of my new grads. I have 5 PAs that have under 3 years of experience, and I learn from them all the time, and I embrace it, and I think it's great. But that doesn't work for everyone. And I think that was the problem and that they just couldn't get over that gap of age and experience, but you have to be open to learning from anyone.
From everyone. So kind of wrapping up on, what not to do when you first become a PA. What do you think what could you say was your biggest, surprise in terms of a red flag where you're like, wow, I never could have seen that coming? I had 2 people. The one that we had, there was someone we had talked about earlier that, had just come out of school, and when you meet someone and you interview with them, everyone can be nice and everyone can give the right answers. And then they come and they're just not the person that you thought they were. And it's always it's disappointing, because you think you have a good sense of character with people when you talk to them. And there's another APP that I worked with, and it was the same thing. Like, actually interviewed and just very personable and gave all the right answers, and then came on board and was a completely different person. Not team oriented. Well, what would that look like? Give me an example of not team oriented. So, what do they do?
So, my team right now, we, in the mornings, we all get together in the morning to review all the patients that we have on the floor. And we do that together, and we kind of divide and conquer what patients we need to round on. Some people be scheduled to go first assist in the OR, but we always sit down together as a team to do that so that we're all on the same page of what's going on for the day. But when you have one person who doesn't come into the room where we're all together doing that, makes their own assignment, goes and sees their own patients, doesn't communicate back with us of their own patients. It's just someone who's not...
Imagine it causes a divide.
Totally. 100%. Right. And same thing, like with anything else, it's, over time it becomes taxing on everybody else because it's stressful, because you feel like, well, why are you off here in this room by yourself when we're all working together? And sometimes it's a personality thing. Sometimes it's just the way that they work. But you also have to, it's important to be working, knowing the way that you work to pick a job that fits that style. Exactly. And if you're a loner and like to do things on your own, then working on a team is not
the best place for you.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the good things that you've seen in your career, the PAs that come in and really kind of hit it out of the park. What are they doing that is like, yeah, you are on the right track?
Ones who can pick everything up quick. And I think of my team now. The team that I am on now, we cover orthopedics, spine, neurosurgery, ENT, plastics, and urology.
Wow.
There are a lot of moving parts. But the person who can come in and within the first week or two have a basic understanding of what is going on every day when you have that many moving parts, the people who ask questions. 20 years later, I ask questions all the time. That shows that you're interested. It shows that you're thinking. And in the end of the day, it's all about our patients and making them better. So you constantly have to question things. If you're not doing that, then it affects our patients. But it's the people just have that drive, the ones who will offer to, come in the extra day. I want to go to the OR. If I say, hey, do you want to go and scrub this case, and they jump up and, want to go do that. Absolutely. And that's like, I remember being that person. And I can at times still be that person. I like to let everybody else do it now, but some days I jump up and want to go do that really cool case. But that just shows that you love what you're doing and you want to be there. Mm-hmm. It's just the people that can pick it up and understand what's going on and just do a good job every day, have a positive attitude. And you can just tell they come in, they're happy, they want to be there.
Mm-hmm. Any little tricks of the trade, any little secrets that you can reveal what they can do to really show that they are engaged? Anything else that you could think of?
I mean, if you love the job that you're doing, you will naturally do that. At least that's what I've found in my life, is that, every job I've been very lucky, and not everyone is. You go through different jobs, and sometimes you start a job and 6 months later you realize this isn't for me. And I'm fortunate enough that I haven't experienced that. I still love what I do every day. And I think that if you do, like, it will naturally show. Because you're going to want to get out there. And in the end of the day, we're all here to help our patients. We want them to get better. And that's really what it's all about.
Awesome. So I've one final question for you, and I think it's just going to be natural. So I'm your genie, and I'm going to grant you one wish, and that's going to give you the ability to go back to Cara 20 years ago when you were first graduating and embarking on your career. What's the one piece of advice, if you could, that you'd go back and give yourself that would have made all the difference?
Just keep fighting for what what you want, and whether it's a job, whether it's with whatever it is, just, keep fighting for what you want. Don't sit back. Not that I ever did that, but just keep fighting.
Awesome.
Because in this world, and in medicine, we have to do that. It's because it's not about us. It's about the people that we take care of. And yeah, you have to you can't sit back. You got to just keep moving forward. Fight for your patients, fight for yourself in your career. And over time, just, you have to be happy, and you got to do what you got to do.
Thank you. Well, that wraps up our time today, Cara. I know it went fast, but we've been at this for a bit. So just want to say thank you, and
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. We will see you all again very soon.